Okay? But to say that this woman did not know right from wrong when clearly, you know, she went to an extensive level to cover her tracks, manipulate everyone, lie, have no care for her, even her own family members, you know, there's a complete, you know, demonstration here of how she knew right from wrong in her actions. So I would find that complete injustice, and I would be very unhappy if that happened.
That sentiment, of course, echoed by family and other community supporters who are here, but it's up to those 12 people, 7 men and 5 women inside of that deliberation room, Ashley.
All right, Julia, and thank you for bringing us the feel of the community. We know that you've shown us all the blue lights that they had at nighttime, a really huge community supporting justice for Gannon. Thank you to Julia Janae. Now we want to shift gears. We are going to have that verdict in approximately 30 minutes, and we will take you live for the verdict in Letecia Stauch. But while we have the time, I want to go now live to Boise, Idaho, where Court TV legal correspondent Shanley Painter is outside the courtroom with all the latest in the Doomsday cult mom murder trial. And Shanley, I can't help but think we're going back and forth between these two pivotal trials where it's moms on trial for the death of their own children. So tell us, what is the latest testimony heard today in these charges against Lori Vallow Daybell for the murder of her own son and daughter, JJ and Tylee?
Yeah, great to be with you, Ashley. The lunch break is just now ending, and I believe the judge is taking up some things outside the jurors' presence currently. But you're right before lunch break, this jury seeing more of those chilling text messages about Lori's own children. And we are in the timeline with FBI Special Agent Doug Hart, where we're in September 2019. The last time Tylee Ryan was seen alive, JJ Vallow seen alive, and what was Lori texting to Chad, texting to Alex about her children leading up to that time, and very much front and center and clear here. And in July 2019, Lori and Chad are texting. Lori says to Chad, when you get home, check Tylee. She's being super sweet and helpful, and she cleaned her room. She must have got switched. Totally not her. And then Lori says, we are both tired of taking care of demons. We are weary. Please ask the Lord to take them. Some ominous messages leading up about, of course, we know Tylee and JJ, she believed, were zombies. And these messages really relevant to the investigation, according to Special Agent Hart, because it talks about death percentages, whether or not Tylee and JJ are light or dark. There was also another text string before the jury earlier today about JJ between Lori and Chad, saying that his death percentage was 0, which meant he was about to pass away at any time. This is in August 2019, August 10th. Lori says, do you think there is a perfectly orchestrated plan to take the children, and we just have to wait for it to be carried out? And Chad responds, there is a plan being orchestrated for the children. I was shown last night how it all fit together, but it has been taken from my mind, of course. And of course, Special Agent Hart saying this means they're going to be free of obstacles. And who initiated this conversation? Lori Vallow Daybell. Who initiated the talk of plan? Lori Vallow Daybell. And then right before the lunch break, there was a text string between Lori and Alex Cox. It was on September 3rd, just a few days before prosecutors say that Tylee Ryan was murdered. And talking about the Wi-Fi passcode. They just moved to Rexburg, Idaho. And so Alex is texting Lori that the passcode is too many kids. And Lori says she's working on Z's, which is zombies in their text language, according to this investigator. And so then Lori says, we're trying to get to the bottom of what we need to do, eliminate them, referring to zombies completely. I'm sure you will be told also. And Alex says, excellent. How eerie that is, Judge Ashley, to know that they're texting about zombies. We have already heard that Tylee was Hillary. There was a zombie in her, that JJ was also possessed. And they're talking about doing away, getting to the bottom to eliminate them completely just days before her murder.
You know, Shanley, it's such a unique case, and hearing those texts to me means that they, or at least Lori Vallow Daybell, believed God had this plan for her children, for them to be taken. But I'm going to argue that's not a defense under the law, and so I don't think that provides any type of defense for the jury to say, oh, she believed God told her to do it. I think it could still be murder or conspiracy, depending on what the jury decides it is, if either. So talk to us a little bit about what else the jury heard today during testimony.
Well, they're hearing more about the relationship, illicit text messages, the affair Chad and Lori were having with each other almost immediately in 2018, and how that relationship panned out through these text messages. Some have been graphic, but what they've also seen today that Lori and Chad had arguments, and they didn't always get along or see eye to eye in this. And there's one that the special agent pointed out in August of 2019, where apparently Chad and Lori were having a fight. We don't know what the genesis of it really was, but we did see these messages. The jury took note. Lori was telling Melanie, we just had a big fight, so probably a no-go for next week. And then we see Chad saying, my heart is crushed. I will never stop loving you. This is very difficult, but I will abide by your request to not talk. Absolutely excruciating to be cut off from you. I love you. This goes on for, hours, that Lori isn't responding to Chad, so much so that he says, I am supposed to warn you that you are unprotected. The angels are angry that you are ignoring me, but he says he isn't allowed to. I'm honestly not trying to manipulate you to respond. I understand that you need your space, but they said that you have cut me off, and the protection I built around your house is gone. I love you and don't want you to be getting attacked. And they say if you at least give me a thumbs up emoji, I will restore our protections. And several moments pass before Lori actually responds with, I love you, and an emoji there at the end. But there's also something later in August where Lori expresses her frustrations again, that it's not moving quickly enough, Judge Ashley. They want to be together. Her husband's already been murdered by her brother, and Tammy yet is still alive, and Chad's going with his family somewhere, and Lori's expressing that she's not his priority in his life. So some relationship drama before this jury, and again, leading up to the deaths of her children and Tammy.
Chanley, I'm really almost speechless. I mean, the amount of information coming out, and really what I believe sounds like a plan, which is conspiracy at the minimum. And we know she's also facing the murder charges for her 2 children. It's fairly just unreal to hear all of this evidence. One more question before I know we need to let you get back into that courtroom. I love to ask you, Lori Vallow Daybell herself, how would you characterize or describe her today?
Today she is her normal self, we want to call it normal. Does seem serious and taking notes, looking down a lot as these text messages are being read at one after the other after the other. They're on the big screen, so this detective, or I say detective, special agent with the FBI, he has this great PowerPoint that puts the words on the screen, making it easier for the jury and everyone to follow along and take notes. And she just seems to be sitting there looking serious today. And as always, when the jury's not in there, she will smile and chat with her attorneys.
All right, Chanley Painter, thank you so much. We're going to let you get back inside the courthouse. We're going to take a break now. Why? Because we are expecting the verdict in the other big trial that we've been following, the stepmother murder trial of Letecia Stauch, a little less than 8 hours. They've come back with a verdict. You're going to hear that live. Stay tuned, Court TV.
We're celebrating graduation, but this party quickly turned tragic.
No one understood how these 3 boys could have been targeted for such a heinous crime.
Someone They Knew with Tamron Hall, tonight, 7/6 Central, on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, unpacking the bizarre allegations in the Doomsday cult mom murder trial. You'll hear the latest audio from inside the courtroom as we bring in experts to break it all down.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
She was psychotic at the time. She was not in touch with reality. Maria apparently was physically abusive when that I actually heard her speak, and that she was harsh and angry. She is guilty of having murdered Gannon. I believe she did not know what she was doing. I'm not certain she even knows that she did do it now as we speak.
Breaking news, Colorado versus Letecia Stauch. She's the stepmom accused of killing her stepson, Gannon. Not just of killing him, because she admits she killed him. However, she said insanity defense, and that's why I cannot be convicted, because I was insane, didn't know right from wrong at the time that it happened. The verdict is back. That's what we know. That's what we can tell you. As soon as court is ready and the judge is going to have that verdict announced, we, of course, will take you there live. So you haven't missed anything. We're waiting to find out what that verdict's going to be. It's a perfect time to welcome in my guests for this hour. It's a Monday, so I have Jash, my criminal defense attorneys, Jack Rice and Josh Schiffer. So grateful to have you both on, and what a huge day here on Court TV, because almost 8 hours, gentlemen, 7 hours, 55 minutes is how long the jury was deliberating, with a few questions sprinkled in, and here we go. So Jack, what do you think? What does it mean, almost 8 hours, and they now have a verdict?
Wow, we've been all watching this thing. I mean, first of all, it takes a long time to work through jury instructions, and sometimes people forget that. It's not just about looking at one another and trying to figure out what you're going to do. You read through everything that the judge hands you, and it's usually a stack of pieces of paper that you're going to run through. And so you work through all of that, and you're trying to understand standards and how it applies, and then you start working through it. But I would answer it shortly 2 ways. The jury asked for 2 things. The first thing that they asked for was the list of exhibits. I think that cuts towards the state, because what they were looking for was all of the proof that was presented to determine beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Stauch actually did this thing. The second thing that they asked for was that final report from the defense expert, and there was none. And that, I think, is important, because they were looking for everything to support whatever else they didn't have already in their own heads, and they received nothing. I think based upon those 2 questions alone, I am leaning towards guilty and competent. And so that's where I'm sitting right now.
All right, so we know, just to 1 second, Josh, just to kind of lay out that when the judge did address the jury about the expert report, he said there is no report, so you have to rely on your collective memories. But then the second piece I want to say is she is facing 13 charges. So that is a lot in terms of going through and deciding each one. Josh, though, unfettered Josh, what are your thoughts?
The lack of the report fits right into what Dr. Lewis was testifying to. The lack of report shows that the state wasn't allowing all of the evidence that a jury would need to make such a grave and important decision. That's the hidden takeaway from some of her testimony was, hey, I'm the super world expert and y'all are in love with me or hate me, whatever. I'm here to throw some wrenches around. And one of those wrenches is the physical measuring of any brain injuries. We heard about the lack of the MRI and things like that. That lack of evidence becomes a very strong disincentive towards conviction, because the hook that the jury can then hang their hat on is, wow, we know this is awful, but we just needed that one more piece of information that we could have gotten had the state done their job right. Now, at the same time, Jack's absolutely right that the jury probably got those jury instructions and plowed through them at the close of last week, maybe had a few questions this morning, but it does take a while. And then they sat down and probably started voting. I think that we're looking more likely at a guilty than not, but I will not be surprised if there are hung charges or some even acquittals on a little bit. And I also don't discount the fact this is a case made to split the charges, and they could give the state some convictions on some and then just not rule or hang on those top charges.
And I totally, when it was approaching 8 hours, I was thinking we've got to have a hung jury, because I think there's at least one who doesn't agree with the rest, that they're trying to talk through all the evidence and find out. I don't know if that's the case or not. But gentlemen, I want to turn our attention to the state of Colorado definition of insanity, because when they asked for the expert reports, and that's the expert presented by the defense, I thought this is what they're looking at now. A is a person who is so diseased or defective in mind at the time of the commission of the acts as to be incapable of distinguishing right from wrong. I want to focus on disease or defective of mind, but also look at Part B, because again, it talks about in Part B, a person who suffered from a condition of mind caused by mental disease or defect. So I think that this jury might have been looking at, is there a report? We really want to do that deep dive into what she was diagnosed with, what the findings were, to determine whether or not she was so diseased or defective in mind, because if she was, then insanity is going to win the day. Josh, your thoughts?
I think you're 100% right. And while we sit back here and be educated about this and have watched it, this jury's probably the first time they've ever dealt with any of these complexities. These aren't easy concepts. These are concepts that judges and lawyers fight and struggle with all the time. Those two different pathways to incompetence. I can see lots of people I know who are smart, law and order, great people saying, hey, I heard all this evidence and it's clear something is wrong with this woman's brain. I just don't know how to fit it in with these words. And that can cause a big discussion. Discussions can cause conflict. And I could absolutely see 1, 2, or 3 of the jurors drawing a line in the sand and saying, I'm not going to send someone who is so clearly disturbed to prison for the rest of their life when there still are good questions about her competence. Wow.
Okay, Jack, but let's talk about just logistics nationwide when it comes to a hung jury, because I think, well, I'm contradicting myself. Jack, tell us this. If theoretically they have a hung jury, which means there's no unanimous decision on the counts that are pending against this defendant, could that be something announced when the verdict is announced?
Yes. Yes. In fact, what you should see, and again, every jurisdiction is a little bit different, but generally what I see is this. We will get certain decisions, and in fact, as jurists, as lawyers, what will sometimes happen where I am is they'll come to us and say, we have decisions on counts 1, 2, 6, and 7. What do? Do we send them back again to try to get answers on all of those or not? And then ultimately, if they can't make a decision, they will come back and actually say, okay, we have a decision on 1, 2, 6, and 7. That means that the potential is they could actually come forward, find that person guilty or not guilty, and then they could come back and retry counts 3, 4, 5. And so that's always that possibility that those things are sitting out there. But I have to say, one of the problems that I think the defense has in this case, and remember, I'm a defense attorney and I can't help it, but one of the problems that the defense has in this case is that these findings, this mental illness defense, can be extraordinarily powerful, and there is quite an expert on the stand. But what they failed to provide in this case, Your Honor, was this. They didn't provide the history that sometimes a jury really loves to see. What we found was a level of incompetence that came after the fact, and that's important. And yet at the same time, but if we think back to other cases that we've covered here on Court TV, what we find is we will find history of mental illness that goes all the way back to prenatal sometimes and all the way up. And you combine those, and that's incredibly powerful for a jury.
And we know, of course, in this case, the greatest charge that she's facing is murder in the first degree. Now, there are other charges as well, child abuse resulting in death. But what I'd like to do now, and if you're just joining us, yes, there is a verdict in the Letecia Stauch case. We are waiting for the court to begin in order to learn what that verdict is. We'll take you live when that happens. Let's listen together, gentlemen, to part of what the closing argument was by the state and then by the defense.
There are people who are truly legally insane, ladies and gentlemen. They don't act like that. If they don't have the capacity to know right from wrong, they're not going to hide the body. They're going to act like nothing happened. They may even do the crime if someone's there watching them because they don't know that it's wrong. Do you think she would have done this to Gannon if anyone was in the room with her? Of course not. They also don't lie. There's no reason to lie because they don't think it's wrong. So they come in and they say things like, my God, I heard a voice that I thought was the devil. And the devil made me do this. I had no choice. Why are you even talking to me about it? That's what we're talking about when we talk about a severe mental disease or defect.
The one thing they cannot answer, because there is no answer, is motive. Motive for why this happened. Motive how we can go from this picture on a hike up at Garden of the Gods, loving, kind, to less than 24 hours later. Brutal rage, 18 stab wounds, 4 blunt force trauma, shock. This wasn't a pre-planned, calculated killing for some gain. This was a psychotic break.
And I just want to clarify, it looks like they may have consolidated some of the counts, that there are actually 4 counts that the jury has to find Letecia Stauch either guilty, not guilty, or not guilty by reason of insanity. Again, the verdict is expected at any moment. Court TV will be there live for the verdict. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, unpacking the bizarre allegations in the Doomsday cult mom murder trial. Cult-like religious beliefs surround Lori Vallow Daybell as she stands trial for the murders of her 2 children. You'll hear the latest audio from inside the courtroom as we bring in experts to break it all down. Plus, live updates from Boise, Idaho on the most compelling moments from today's testimony.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
In Colorado, we will soon learn the fate of the defendant, Letecia Stauch. The verdict should be announced at any moment. You do not want to miss this verdict. It has been 2 years since the murder of her 11-year-old stepson, Gannon. The community continues to join together to honor his memory. As we wait for the verdict that should be happening anytime, let's hear what the community is saying about this tragic case.
I noticed today you are head to toe, and I say that literally, in blue. Yes. Just point out to me some of the things today that you made sure showed your support for Gannon.
So I have my water bottle. I got a little band, as well as many other people. I got the little, hair clip thing. I did my hair as well.
Dyed it blue.
Yes. I have shoes, the shirt, everything, just to make sure that I'm here and accounted for, to show my support of his color, you know.
People are held responsible for their actions. At the end of the day, he was an 11-year-old little boy that didn't deserve what happened to him. Sorry. You know, I think of my own children, and I can't even imagine. I can't.
What is your opinion at that point? We know the jury's deliberating right now, but from what you've seen sitting there in the gallery.
Well, I think that it's kind of difficult for lay people that don't understand that language that they were talking about in, psychology. I think if they had a better understanding of it, then they probably would be able to form a better opinion. But I think it was enough evidence to prove that I don't think she was insane. I think at the time she was crazy, but I don't think she was insane. And she knew what she was doing.
And you feel there's a difference between that, the crazy but not insane, not to quote the documentary that Dr. Lewis consulted for, but you think there was a crazy moment for her.
Right. And I don't think that Dr. Lewis was probably the best person to bring in as as an expert.
What do you think was the biggest problem with her testimony?
Well, I think, I can't go by ageism. I just think it was the information, the facts, and they weren't that clear.
Still with us, attorneys Jack Rice and Josh Schiffer. Let's talk about what happens if the verdict, and we don't know what it is yet, but if the verdict is not guilty by reason of insanity on the murder in the first-degree count. What does that mean? Because you just heard one of the people in that MASH say people are held responsible for their actions. That's what everybody wants to see in our criminal justice system. So would she be held responsible if it's a not guilty by reason of insanity? Josh?
I wouldn't say everybody wants to see it. There are some people that actively work against the justice system from within the justice system, but that's talk for another day. What I really think is going to happen, I don't believe she's going to, even with a not guilty on the top count, be able to escape liability on everything. So there's almost certainly going to be a sentence, and then the Department of Corrections is the sole arbiter of what happens during the sentencing phase in virtually every single state. And they'll send her to a classification and diagnostic facility and then determine, according to their own local rules and procedures, what kind of housing, treatment, et cetera, is going to be appropriate for the length of her sentence. Now, the judge also has other options that they can pursue under local law, but I won't be surprised for whatever happens, regardless of guilt or innocence on the top charge, that Ms. Stauch receives substantial medical intervention for the substantial future.
All right, so Jack, I took an informal poll on Twitter about guilty or not as soon as the jury started deliberating. And in that one day, it was 97% of the viewers who have been watching, following along, said she's guilty, or they anticipate the verdict will be guilty. Is there any opportunity in your mind, in your opinion, that one juror has said not guilty at all? She needs to be acquitted. Is that, based on the evidence presented, even a possibility in your opinion?
This is the interesting thing about being a juror, Your Honor. It's that when you're the judge, you get to determine what the law is, and you clarify that for the jury. When you're a juror, you get to be the judge of the facts. You get to decide, unilaterally get to decide what that standard is and whether or not the state has met it. And as a result, you have the ability to stand up and say, this is what I think, and I'm not coming off of that. Now, what makes this more complicated is when you're dealing with a group of 6, you're dealing with a group of 8, you're dealing with a group of 12, is that you have to stand up against everybody else. Now, that could be for guilt, that could be for not guilty. But the point is you have to be able to do that. Now, what makes this case particularly difficult is that she did it. Everybody seems like almost universally hates this woman like cancer. They just do. Now, as a result of that, intellectually, viscerally, it makes it even harder, because what you have to be able to do then is to say, despite that, I'm willing to stand on a principle of insanity that protects her, and nobody viscerally wants to protect her. That's the challenge of even one juror standing up saying, I refuse to find her guilty of anything, or even I refuse to find her guilty but insane. That is the challenge that this jury faces, and I really hope that we all sort of tip our hats to this jury. This is so incredibly hard, emotional, and difficult, and to simply say they didn't get it right. These people are neck deep in this case, and they're going to carry this with them for probably the rest of their lives.
And they asked questions. They came back out and said to the judge, can we see this? That means they were purposeful and intentional, in my experience, looking at the entire case, the evidence presented, the law for the charges to determine what their verdict would be. Josh, did you have something, I think, maybe to add to that?
I might have had a little something to add, because Jack's right that it makes it harder, but it also makes it easier. Her behavior isn't on the line. You either are going to believe that she's lacking this capacity or acting under this disability, or you don't. So since that line's really bright, it can actually add foundation to the argument that 1, 2, 3, or 4 jurors could take, especially on this top count, because Jack's totally right. There's no question she did it. That's the problem. It's whether we can hold her responsible. And I see well-thought jurors saying, hey, we don't have the physical evidence that the best expert would have needed to make this determination, because the state
I'm gonna
didn't
wait,
do
hang
it.
on, Josh. I'm gonna stop you there, only because I understand we have pictures of live court. We want to show those to see what's going on inside the courtroom.
Agree with their verdict. You need to exercise appropriate decorum. So let's not have any emotional outbursts or anything like that. And I think we're good to go. Let's go ahead and bring the jury in, now that I have you doing something else. Okay. But they all seem to be on.
And those were the standard, really, admonishments that most judges do tell the gallery, which is no one is to react visibly. I don't want to have anyone disrupt the courtroom when the verdict is read. And he has now called the jury in. We do understand that Al Stauch, who is the father of Gannon, he was married to the defendant.
So long as it's broadcasting, I just wanted to make sure that was not the issue.
That he is present in that courtroom. He was present for closing arguments. We received reports. He cried during much of the closing argument, and that he is present in the courtroom for the delivery of this verdict. 4 counts that Letecia Stauch faces.
All rise for the jury, please. Thank you. You may all be seated. Court will recall 20 CR 1358, People versus Letecia Stauch. Record should reflect the jury has returned to the courtroom. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I see that juror number 5 that would be you, has all the instructions and things like that. That's usually a tip-off to me that you might be the foreperson. Are you in fact the foreperson? And has the jury reached verdicts in this case? Yes, sir. All right, if you would hand the instructions and the verdict forms to Mr. Sproul, please. Thank you. All right, the verdict forms do appear to be in proper order. I will have a question for you because there's some extra writing on here, but I think I understand what's going on. So with respect to count number 1, charge of murder in the first degree after deliberation, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 1, murder in the first degree after deliberation. With respect to count number 2, charge of murder in the first degree, child under 12 by a person in a position of trust, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 2, murder in the first degree, child under 12, position of trust. With respect to count number 3, charge of tampering with a deceased human body, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 3, tampering with a deceased human body. With respect to count number 4, charge of tampering with physical evidence, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 4, tampering with physical evidence. I wanted to ask the jury, or actually the foreperson, there is some extra writing on here with respect to question number 1. There's a cross through and some initials. And then on part B, there's also a cross through with initials. Was that signifying that you were not answering that and you intended to answer guilty as to that charge?
Yes, sir.
All right. And is that what you intended with all of the other verdict forms?
Yes, sir.
All right. With that, does either side wish to have the jury poll the prosecution?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, what this means is that this is a process that is sometimes requested by the attorneys following a verdict to make sure that everybody has agreed on all parts of it. So I'll go down the row, starting in the back. Juror number 1, is this and are these your verdicts? Juror number 2, is this and are these your verdicts? Juror number 3, is this and are these your verdicts? Juror number 4, is this and are these your verdicts? Juror number 5, is this and are these your verdicts? Juror number 6, is this and are these your verdicts? Juror number 7, is this and are these your verdicts? Yes, sir. Juror number 8, is this and are these your verdicts? Yes, sir. Juror number 9, is this and are these your verdicts? Juror number 10, is this and are these your verdicts? Juror number 11, is this and are these your verdicts? Juror number 12, is this and are these your verdicts? Yes, I want to thank all of you for your service. Jurors don't get a lot of training. However, you all were selected because you were willing to be open-minded and impartial, and were willing to make decisions based on the facts and the law. You, the jury, heard and saw the evidence. You paid attention all day, every day. Someone else may tell you they disagree with or they disagree with your verdict or some aspect of your service. They may want to express their opinion on the matter. However, we didn't ask them for any of their opinions. We asked you for your judgment. We asked you for your verdict based on the law and based on the evidence. Someone else may tell you they think they're better and smarter and more intuitive than all of you were. Ignore them. As a judge, rarely does a day go by that I don't make somebody in the courtroom mad. The fact that some people may disagree with your verdict or the law only means that those who disagree with you were not carefully selected to be fair and impartial. They did not take an oath to follow the law and to judge all of the facts, and they see it differently from you because they didn't see it all from the perspective you did. And they did not discuss the facts with 11 others who were also fair and impartial and sworn to follow the law. You decided this case. This verdict is your verdict. And this is the verdict in the case. No poll, no approval or disapproval, and no press analysis changes that fact. This is the verdict in the case. The press or someone else at some point may wish to talk to you. We live in a world of exceptional voyeurism in reality TV, and this is about as real as it gets. They may try to dissect the evidence, your thought process, and your decision. It's a free country. Anyone can ask you anything about your verdict. You can answer if you choose. They can also, however, respect your privacy and allow you to contact them only if you want to talk to them. And if you don't want to, you don't have to talk to anyone about your verdict. If you do talk with someone, you can tell them as little or as much as you like. Someone may even ask you to give an affidavit regarding some aspect of your jury service. You're free to give an affidavit. You're free to decline to give an affidavit. That is a personal decision you are entitled to make. If anyone continues to talk to you after you have told them you do not want to speak about the matter or becomes critical of you or your jury service, please report that incident to me. Again, I want to thank you very much for your service. Without honest people of our community serving on jurors, we cannot secure the right to a jury trial in this country. And it's a very valuable and a very important right. I want to leave you with some language from a case that was decided by the United States Supreme Court in Louisiana versus Duncan. In that case, an individual was denied the right to a jury by trial, or a trial by jury, sorry. And that case went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court sent it back to the state of Louisiana. And it said, you need to give this man what the Constitution requires, which is a trial by jury. And when it sent the case back to Louisiana, it said, we believe that trial by jury is fundamental to the American scheme of justice. Trial by jury is more than an instrument of justice and more than one wheel of the Constitution. It is the lamp that shows that freedom lives. Without your dedication and sacrifice, that lamp would not shine as brightly as it does. So I truly thank you for your service. You are now discharged with the thanks of the court. And for the last time, all rise for the jury, please.
Gentlemen, I mean, what an extraordinary focus on the jury we'll talk about. But look at Letecia Stauch. She hasn't really reacted. Let's go back into court.
I don't know how you want to proceed on sentencing. I do need to talk to the jury for a few minutes because I need to tell them some things about security issues, counseling issues, and things like that. So I do need to talk with them for a few minutes. I also didn't know if the family, the prosecution, anybody wanted to have some time to process the verdicts. I also understand that everybody's been here for 5 weeks, so I get that part too. So I'm open to whatever you want to do with respect to sentencing, but I probably am going to need at least a half an hour with the jury.
I think that would be appropriate, Judge. the people are obviously ready to go to immediate sentencing. I believe defense is as well. And I can tell you that the family's been thinking about this day for over 3 years. They're ready to go to sentencing as well.
Okay. Then give me about 30 minutes and we will come back and proceed to sentencing at that point in time.
All right. Sentencing in 30 minutes, and I have to tell you, I'm watching Letecia Stauch. I want to leave it on this as long as we can for you to watch them, gentlemen. Watch her, the defendant. I mean, she didn't really react. She seemed rather stoic, and right now to me, she doesn't seem that she seems non-pulsed by it. What do you think, Jack?
I agree. I agree. I mean, that's the piece of this. But you know what it comes down to when we were sort of talking about this texting back and forth? There was one of the viewers, one of the last viewers that we had during this last package. And what she said was she was crazy but not insane. And there is this balance, this space where we're trying to make that determination. The problem is with something like this is that's what part of what this jury was struggling with. How could anybody do this and not be crazy? And I think that's the piece that they went with. And they basically pivoted back to say, we didn't buy into this. This woman clearly is troubled, clearly confused, clearly mentally ill. But mental illness does not mean that you don't have competency. And that's one of the pieces of the criminal justice system that people frequently forget. You can be all sorts of things in terms of mental illness, but that doesn't rise to the very high standard of being incompetent. And I think that's where we may be sitting right here.
And all of those factors about the mental health and any mental issues she may have, I would submit will be considered for the sentencing. We know they said sentencing is going to begin in 30 minutes. The state said, we're ready. These families have been ready for this for more than 3 years. They are ready to proceed. Defense had agreed they were ready to proceed. I like that the judge said to the attorneys, to everybody in the courtroom, you may need time to process this. I need to go talk to the jury about logistics, and you may need time to process the verdict to decide, but it sounds like everyone is ready to go forward with sentencing. Josh, your thoughts on that and this verdict?
Yeah, and I want to start with how impressive this judge is.
Yeah, me too.
Judges, people always talk, oh, it can't be that hard. You're just up there calling balls and strikes. Being a judge sits with you, I think, in a way that until you've done it, you really can't fully appreciate it, because you're there to serve everyone, including the person you just convicted. It's not just about victims, just about lawyers, just about jurors or stakeholders. It is a community function, and I love to watch a caring and considerate jurist work and care for his jurors, because these jurors have seen tremendously traumatic evidence that was jammed in their face while on TV as they sit in judgment of a human being in a way that none of them ever have before. And for His Honor to take this time and ensure that there is some support and care is a role modeling that I hope more judges follow up with. I note specifically that Ms. Stauch took this verdict standing up, face forward with no reaction, and now I want to know what her demeanor is. Does it change?
Does it change? You know, one of the things I have to add to your thoughts about the judge, completely agree, extraordinary focus on the jury, and the fact that he said, we asked for your judgment, not your opinions, and you did that, and you delivered this verdict, and this is the verdict. No matter what public opinion is, no matter what media says, this is the verdict. All right, give me your thoughts in response to that. You only have 10 seconds, Jack, because we're about to take a break.
I've been teaching trial advocacy worldwide for 20 years. I've been doing this for 25 years. This is a brutal thing. We take it very personally. I was emotional listening to what that meant. This is about the fundamental piece that keeps us bound together. It's an extraordinary day.
Yep, absolutely agree. All right, we have to take a break. We're approaching the top of the hour. Julia Janae is going to have a live report from Colorado. Stay tuned. We'll be right back, and we will be bringing you the sentencing when it begins.
With respect to count number 1, charge of murder in the first degree after deliberation, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 1.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcox.
And I'm Michael Ayala, and we're both here today giving you your front row seat to justice. Now, we're going to go live to Colorado Springs, where Court TV legal correspondent Julia Janae has the latest. All right, Julia, it was dramatic stuff. I mean, we weren't sure how it was going to turn out after how long that jury deliberated, but take us back to the verdict.
Michael, they were firm and they were determined when they were polled, these jurors, when they came back with that unequivocal, guilty down the line verdict. Let's go back to that moment inside of Judge Gregory Werner's courtroom.
With respect to count number 1, charge of murder in the first degree after deliberation, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 1, murder in the first degree after deliberation. With respect to count number 2, charge of murder in the first degree, child under 12 by a person in a position of trust, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 2, murder in the first degree, child under 12, position of trust. With respect to count number 3, charge of tampering with a deceased human body, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 3, tampering with a deceased human body. With respect to count number 4, charge of tampering with physical evidence, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 4, tampering with physical evidence.
Guilty on all 4 counts that were against Letecia Stauch. No reaction from her when all of this happened, but emotion was coursing through that courtroom leading up to the moment that we heard guilty. You could hear a small cheer from the gallery, even though the judge did tell them about decorum, but it seemed that they just could not help but to react to those words after those 7+ hours of deliberations. Ashley, Michael?
Well, I was waiting for some reaction from the defendant, but we didn't see it, to your point, Julia. However, you have been talking throughout this case about supporters who have really come from everywhere to watch this case. And I understand you have someone there now about this case.
Oh, actually, don't have anyone on standby now. Things got a little bit crazy with the verdict, so we don't have anyone standing by right now. I just came out of the courthouse, but I do want to tell you about the family of Gannon who's there in the courtroom. Just give you an idea of what things were like there when that verdict was read, because as I mentioned, that emotion coursing, you could feel it. The mother of Gannon Stauch, Landon Hyatt, she had one hand behind her so that she can reach the family members that were on the second row. That's also where Al Stauch and his family was seated, who's the father of Gannon, and she was hugging closely to the people around her, and then those tears just flowed once she knew that this verdict was guilty for the justice in the killing of her little boy Gannon. She's been telling people that she wants Gannon to be their hero, that he was born a preemie, he was a fighter all of his life, even fought in his final moments. But when this was over, once the jury had come back with their verdict and they were released and the prosecutors were able to come and greet the family, you just saw Landon Hyatt fall into the arms of one of the prosecutors. Her hands were shaking. It was just a bear hug that lasted for a solid 2 minutes as she just held on, clearly so grateful at this outcome, what has come 3.5 years later. You also saw those tears from supporters who were sitting on the opposite side from the family, but even though they weren't family, Gannon seemed to be that important to them just in the way they emotionally reacted to this verdict. I want to let you listen to a woman who I interviewed. Her name is Heather. She is from Rhode Island, and she said that she felt a calling in coming here to Colorado Springs for the sole purpose of following this trial. But essentially she said that she felt that this pain could be turned into purpose. She hopes that laws will be stricter when it comes to children and children's rights and child protective, but that's what we are hearing here in the courtroom as we now wait for the sentencing that is going to happen now immediately while the judge is talking to these jurors.
Now, Julia, you know, we've seen many different Letecia Stauchs, no pun intended. I mean, throughout the trial, not necessarily with the mental health issues, but throughout the trial. And today I was particularly interested in her reaction to the verdict. What could you see?
Yeah, I was sitting directly behind her. So on the defense side of the rooms where they had the media, and I was able to just look and see her sitting there between her attorneys as she has. I will say her posture was a little bit different today because during most of the evidence, she was completely stooped over. She had her head perpendicular with the table, and you couldn't make out much from her. Still couldn't see her face from where I was sitting, but I noticed she was sitting up today. She was looking up. Can't tell if she was looking at the jury or making any eye contact, which would have been rare because she did not look their way much of the trial that I've been in the courtroom. But she did not seem to have any reaction to this verdict, to guilty, 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 to the cries that we could hear in the courtroom. She just seemed stoic from what I could see. Her hair was a bit matted in the back. She had it long and on her shoulders, but that seems to be what we get from Letecia Stauch, except for some of those moments that the judges had to reprimand her for some offensive behavior inside of the courtroom.
You know, Judge, often when you get verdicts or even when you have clients who take plea deals, there's a sense of relief that comes over them. And I wonder if that's what we saw.
I want to talk to you about that more a little later on because I wondered the same. I think you and I have talked about this in the past. Is that what she felt? All right, Julia, I also want to ask you, though, tell us, because I was really impressed with the judge and how he addressed the jury after the guilty verdict to say to them, this is the verdict in the case. You have issued a judgment you are asked to issue. What do we know about the sentencing phase? What do we expect with that?
Well, Judge Gregory Warner, you're right, he gave just a moving soliloquy to this jury before he released them, but he also wanted to go and talk with them, and he said it's going to take him 30 minutes. That's a bit longer than we usually see judges need to meet with jurors after a verdict, but he wanted to spend that time with them before they go immediately into the sentencing. What we know is that the sentence is more than likely going to be life in prison without parole. It's a mandatory sentence here in Colorado for first-degree murder. So it essentially is going through the motions. It will give these victims the chance to share their impact statements with the judge. It will be a chance for the defense to bring up anything that they want to on behalf of Letecia Stauch, but because of that mandatory sentence on that top charge with that guilty verdict from the jury, her fate essentially is sealed.
All right, Julia Janae, thank you so much for that report. Appreciate it. As always, again, Letecia Stauch found guilty of all charges, including first-degree murder in the death of Gannon, 11-year-old Gannon. Let's bring in our guests joining us for this hour, criminal defense attorneys Jack Rice and Josh Schiffer. Gentlemen, great to see you as always. And Josh, I'll start with you because I had a visceral reaction. It was interesting because people really got invested in this case. And, you know, there was a sense of almost relief from a lot of the people around our newsroom and around people watching and people online. Is that the sense you got with this verdict, that they were just relieved that she wasn't able to pull this off, at least according to this jury?
If I didn't know better, I'd think you were following me on Twitter, because literally that was that sense of relief. I said I could almost hear the sigh, where all of these people who were so attached to this case in a way I haven't seen in a long time. And I think it was due to the cruelty. I think it was due to the dynamic between these families, the stepmom, a child death. Those are always meaningful. But there was such an emotional connection between individuals, court watchers, courties, true crime fans, and this particular case, because it was tragic and outrageous. And I believe Ms. Stauch's behavior during the trial drove that. The immediate commentary from everyone online relating to her reaction or lack thereof as the verdict was announced was stunning. The internets are just bursting with people explaining how, you know, just woof, our system works. They weren't tricked by what this woman was trying to basically pull on the innocent jurors of Colorado. And they're really relieved that the system worked for Gannon. And that's good for the institutions that we honor and that we relish. And it's at a time when our institutions are struggling right now.
But I have to mention that so much of the response, at least that I saw, Michael, on social media, was there is such a thing as DID. That is a thing. This isn't it. And so what's interesting to me is I don't think there's any argument that she doesn't have mental health issues, but I think the jury reinforces what people believed watching, which is whatever she has, it was not insanity. She knew right from wrong, and I think there are two reasons. Number one, the extent of injuries to poor Gannon when you have the stabbing and blunt force and shooting, and then the way his body was disrespected, treated, and thrown off a bridge in a suitcase.
You know, what's interesting is that even the doctor who took the stand, because she wasn't able to get the MRI and the EEG, her response to the juror's question about that was, look, my diagnosis is still a work in progress. She didn't consider it final, but she did say that there was some psychosis. That's without doubt. And I think, Jack, that's fair to say that there was a psychosis here. But I'm going to say it this way because we've seen cases, let's say like Jeffrey Dahmer, who did some truly outrageous things, be convicted of murder. Crazy is one thing, and it is not insane, which is a much more difficult thing to prove.
Michael, absolutely. That is the needle that we're trying to thread, is this idea of insanity on the one side versus, dare I say it, just crazy on the other. And that is important in a case like this because you're trying to make the decision, and I appreciate the judge's statement regarding this idea of DID and whether or not that was quote unquote real. And in fact, I think the jury thought it was too. It's just that, remember, this is a standard. This process is, does it exist? Yes. The next question is, does this apply to her, and does she meet that standard? I think in this particular case, what the jury did was they really tried to dig into this. This was 8 hours, remember, and they dug in and said, you know what? This isn't enough. This isn't enough for us to make this determination. Therefore, we simply believe that the state has proved their case beyond a reasonable doubt, and there wasn't that, dare I use the term, loophole that we're going to put her through because they just didn't bring enough for it.
Well, Josh, let's talk a little bit about Letecia Stauch and her reaction. And Michael mentioned, you know, maybe it's because she's relieved. What's your experience? She waited almost 8 hours, 7 hours and 55 minutes for a verdict. And then after receiving that verdict, she just sat. She didn't react. What must that be like?
So I've been at the table, Jack's been at the table, y'all have been at the table. You don't know what the mentality of your client's going to be at that moment. And we are completely in the dark about what kind of medical therapy she's receiving right now. And it would be appropriate to speculate that the doctors are watching her. These are really emotional issues. She clearly has a big fat file down at the jail, and they may have medicated her to affect her reaction today with the knowledge that it was going to be a challenging day emotionally. So it's hard to look too deep into her reaction, other than it's so different than her behavior during this entire trial. This is a woman that, you know, we can just go through what she was doing, yelling, screaming, kicked out of court. You know, lawyers were not getting along very well with her. There were a lot of outbursts. I wonder how this settles in with her over the next several days and weeks. And I wonder what, if anything, the judge is going to say during the sentence to appraise the Department of Corrections. There are options for judges to mandate specific mental health programming, testing, evaluations. And I think that that's probably a really good idea for Ms. Stauch. She also may come out with some statements herself. Not super common, but nothing about this case has been super common. I won't be surprised if one of her various personalities or identities wants to come out and show or say what her truth is at this moment, as much as we all understand that's not necessarily in her best interest.
You know, that's interesting because I had a lot of folks around here saying, do you think they're going to have guards standing behind her because she might go crazy, she might act out, and none of that, none of it at all. Very calm. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the sentencing. But Jack, you're a friend of mine. So I want to push back a little bit, and I know you'll understand. I want to give you an opportunity to explain, because you guys are members of the defense bar. You understand where I'm coming from when I guess I took a little bit of an exception when you called the insanity defense a loophole. I just want you to explain. I think I understand what you meant in this particular case, but I want you to explain.
No, I appreciate that. What I'm talking about is there are those simply in the public watching this and thinking of it as an excuse, as a justification for what they did, or as the loophole that you can sort of slide something through or slide something under a door. That is not the case. In fact, this insanity defense is a legitimate legal approach that is a requirement. This is a part of the process. If we think about what we're looking at in every single case, including this one, is there has to be a question of competency. There always has to be the ability for anybody who is charged with a crime to understand, well, it depends upon the standard because it's actually different in different states, what they're being charged with. They understand the concepts of right and wrong, and they can actually help in the defense of their case, depending upon the standard. And this idea of competency is always a fundamental baseline in every single one. It is not a loophole, but some people think that it is. And so it's critically important that we realize that this is part of that process. And I think one of the reasons that this jury had to struggle so much is that normally in most criminal cases that we see, we don't have that. We're not having the problem of making that determination in addition to whether they actually did it. So I think it's very, very important to make that a distinction. And I do actually appreciate the time to sort of finish that thought out.
And you know, I almost want popcorn because I learn from every time we do this show, and I'm watching back and forth, and it's such great conversation around all of these issues for our viewers to learn from each of you. All right, sentencing is moments away. I wonder, is Letecia Stauch going to choose to speak? We don't know, but we're going to take you in that courtroom live in Colorado on the other side of a short break.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, unpacking the bizarre allegations in the Doomsday cult mom murder trial. Cult-like religious beliefs surround Lori Vallow Daybell as she stands trial for the murders of her 2 children. You'll hear the latest audio from inside the courtroom as we bring in experts to break it all down. Plus, live updates from Boise, Idaho on the most compelling moments from today's testimony.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Back now to the stepmother murder trial of Letecia Stauch. Now, a short time ago, she was found guilty on all counts in the death of 11-year-old Gannon Stauch. We are now standing by waiting for sentencing to begin. Now, in case you missed it, here's the moment the verdict was handed down.
With respect to count number 1, charge of murder in the first degree after deliberation, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 1, murder in the first degree after deliberation. With respect to count number 2, charge of murder in the first degree, child under 12 by a person in a position of trust, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 2, murder in the first degree, child under 12, position of trust. With respect to count number 3, charge of tampering with a deceased human body, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 3, tampering with a deceased human body. With respect to count number 4, charge of tampering with physical evidence, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 4, tampering with physical evidence.
While we wait for sentencing, we want to take a closer look at dissociative identity disorder, or DID. Letecia wanted jurors to believe that an alter ego named Maria killed Gannon. The jury didn't buy it, but DID is very much real. Court TV's Julia Janae gives us a closer look at the disorder.
To whom am I speaking with now?
Dr. Fletcher, it's Barry.
The movie Split features a character with 23 personalities, all inhabiting the same body, and one of them has kidnapped and imprisoned 3 young women.
Patricia has reminded me that I was sent to get you for a reason.
The character Kevin suffers from dissociative identity disorder, and his personalities range from this little boy,
how old are you?
9.
To a domineering woman.
Don't worry. I'll talk to him.
Dissociative identity disorder is not just the stuff of movies. The claim is being made by Letecia Stauch, accused of murder in her stepson Gannon's death.
But there was some major psychotic crack that went on during this time.
A diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder, or what used to be known as multiple personality disorder, can develop as a result of overwhelming childhood trauma.
It's really important to know that DID is a very, very rare condition, but in some theories, the idea is that it develops out of extreme trauma in your brain and trying to protect you, tries to essentially split off certain parts of your traumatic experiences so that the core of you can still survive and persevere in this life.
In Stauch's case, it was the relentless abuse by a string of stepfathers that caused her personality to fragment, according to her defense.
All the good and all the bad, all the evil and the hate can't reside in one place.
Defense attorneys contend Stauch, a schoolteacher and a loving stepmother, was a different person when she killed Gannon. It was an alternate personality, Maria, the one who also attacked a deputy. That confrontation, caught on video, was played for jurors.
She keeps threatening me. Stop. Well, she keeps threatening. Stop.
During a psychiatric evaluation after her arrest in 2020, Letecia explains that she has no control over Maria.
I can switch back and forth, but I cannot switch to Maria without it being triggered. Like, you'd have to put me like under some drug-induced setting or something to trigger and get Maria. I can't forcefully switch her, but everyone else I can.
But prosecutors say Stauch is faking her symptoms.
Did she ever change personalities to a different personality?
I was talking to the defendant the entire time.
Al Stauch, Letecia's husband and Gannon's father, testified he never noticed a change in her personality.
Mr. Stauch, how much time did you spend with this defendant?
Roughly 6 years.
Gannon's brutal murder and Letecia's alleged attempts to cover it up could mean an uphill battle for the defense.
DID is very, very difficult to assess and diagnose, and you'd have to try to establish that this alternate personality somehow has a different moral code from the core personality, and that the core personality absolutely had no idea whatsoever what the alternate personality was planning to do or eventually did.
And as you may be aware, the jury said that there was no DID in this case, guilty on all 4 counts. Now, next is sentencing. That is starting any moment. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll get you back into court for the sentencing in this case.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, unpacking the bizarre allegations in the Doomsday cult mom murder trial. Cult-like religious beliefs surround Lori Vallow Daybell as she stands trial for the murders of her 2 children. You'll hear the latest audio from inside the courtroom as we bring in experts to break it all down. Plus, live updates from Boise, Idaho on the most compelling moments from today's testimony.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan, tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
Hello, welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala here with Judge Ashley Wilcott. Just about 30 minutes or so ago, Letecia Stauch was found guilty of all charges in the murder of her stepson, Gannon Stauch. They went directly into sentencing. The judge wanted to speak to the jury for about 30 minutes or so. They are going now. They're in the middle of sentencing, and they're doing victim impact statements now. You're listening. What we're going to be listening to in just a second is Jeff Davenport. He's Gannon's great uncle. So let's get into the courtroom for his testimony.
Some of it to speak, yes.
Sure. All right. Before we start, I want to remind everybody that I am the person that imposes the sentence in this case. That means that when you come up to the podium, you address all your comments to me. You need to do that in a respectful fashion. Remember the decorum. You guys have done great for the last 5 or 6 weeks. And I know we're at the end now, but it's still important to continue with that type of appropriate and proper conduct. So if there's anyone that is going to speak as to sentencing, you don't turn and face the defendant. All your comments are directed to me. In addition, Ms. Stauch, you'll have an opportunity to make a statement to the court as well. Same rule applies to you. Your comments are directed to me. You don't turn and face anybody in the gallery or anybody else. If you have any comments, you make them to me. So with that, prosecution.
Just before we get started, I just got a notification that it sounds like maybe on WebEx your mic might be off, or I was just getting a notification that people are not hearing that.
It looks like it's on. Or my tab says it's on.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
He says it's working.
Okay.
It may not have been on a little bit ago, and we were having a technical issue, and I think it got restarted, so I think we're okay now.
Okay.
So, but if you continue to get messages, let me know.
I will do, Judge.
Okay.
The first person that would like to make a statement to the court is Nicole.
All right.
And I'll have each person spell a name for the court report.
Yes. All right. Just step up to the podium there and just state your name and then tell me what you have to tell me.
Nicole Mobley, NICOLE-MOBLEY. I just want to initially thank you for everything that you've done through all of this, as well as the prosecution. This has been well over 3 years of a family, as well as hundreds or thousands of us who have gone through a lot. It's been hard. It's been heartbreaking. And to finally see some kind of justice, especially for his family, is incredible. And I just want to thank everybody for everything that you guys have done.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Jane?
Hello, Your Honor. My name is Janie Cadenas.
All right. Can you spell that last name?
Cadenas.
Okay, go ahead.
Also, like what Nicole said, wanted to thank you for making this such a fair and neutral trial through the process. I am here today as I have sat with the family for the last 3 years as a community member in Lorson Ranch, who has watched the turmoil that this has caused everybody in our community. 3 years ago, we heard as a neighborhood what happened, that a little boy went missing, and we rallied together in a way that most communities can never experience or imagine. We came together and we helped find ways to get media involved, to get search parties involved, to do everything we could to be of assistance to find this little boy, because Gannon wasn't just a neighbor, he was all of our little boys. For months and months until he was found, we were all scared to let our kids go outside because we were scared that they would be kidnapped. We didn't know what was going to happen. And through that process, we all came together and we met Landon and Al, those of us that didn't know them, and we built relationships and friendships and garnered a family relationship with them through that process. But this is just one thing that, as a community member, somebody who was a part of it from the beginning, that I can confidently say, this is the worst tragedy that anybody could ever go through, and every parent's nightmare. And I have watched and held Landon as she falls apart time after time. But we are here today, and justice has finally been served for Gannon. And we want to thank you as a community for that opportunity for this to happen today.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Jeff.
Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Jeff Davenport, Jeffdavenport.
All right.
I am Gannon's great uncle. I'm Albert's uncle, and my sister Debbie, who hopefully will be speaking in a few minutes, is his grandmother. Because I am a couple of steps away from him in relation, even though I have personal memories of Gannon and the loving, wonderful young man that he was and the great man he would have been. I want to leave the depth of impact to his parents. So I would like to talk about the breadth of impact. The preciousness of an 11-year-old's life is beyond measure, and all other impacts to all the rest of us pale in comparison to the loss he suffered himself. But this now convicted murderer did not just murder Gannon. She murdered all of the love and joy and encouragement and security he would have brought to all those he encountered throughout his life. She murdered his children and his grandchildren and all of the joy and love and encouragement and security they would have brought to all those they encountered throughout their life, and so on and so on. She murdered his junior prom, his senior prom, his high school graduation, his college years, his career, his marriage, his retirement, and his golden years, and it just goes on and on. Because of her crime, all of our fragile trust in one another has been further eroded. It's not an exaggeration to say that millions of people throughout the world have heard of this crime and will, as a consequence, be less trusting and more suspicious of those in whose care they entrust their children, even those who have loved and cared for their children for years. And because of her specious, cynical, calculated use of the NGRI defense in this case, those who are truly mentally ill will be treated with more suspicion and may not receive the help that they need. The reverberations of her murder of Gannon will ripple throughout eternity, and the impact of her crime is truly incalculable. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Allen?
Thank you, Judge. It's Veronica Birkenstock, spelled Veronica, Birkenstock, Birkenstock. I am Landon's Aunt Veronica, or Aunt V, Gannon's great aunt. Nothing in life prepares you for the murder of a child. No one ever thinks this can happen to your family. A little over 3.5 years ago, I got a call, a very dreaded call, that I needed to come and be with Landon. For over 3 years, I have dear left her side in all the hearings, all the motions, and all the hearings that the defendant decided not to come to because she didn't think it was important. But regardless, we showed up, and we showed up for Gannon. I want to talk about forgiveness today because as a Christian, I have to forgive, not because I want to, because human flesh does not want to. The judge today, on behalf of Landon and I, we want this court to know that we have forgiven Letecia for what she did. God is the ultimate judger. But I pray today that your judge will give her what she deserves on this earth and will let God do the rest in eternity. I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but I would like to leave this Bible. And at some point in time, if you think it's okay, to give to Letecia as she serves her life sentence. And we hope that will be the punishment that you render shortly. But this is a life application Bible. For the rest of her natural life, I hope she will read the Word of God. And I hope that she will turn from her evil ways and the things that she did to our family. I have sat here for 6 weeks, and I have listened to the horrendous things that she did to my nephew. I don't want the last memory of him to be what she did to him. Our last memory of Gannon was one of fun, love, joy. So articulate, and despite everything, he was gifted and intelligent. He wasn't supposed to live. The day he was born, the doctors told us he had really no chance. He weighed 1 pound and a few ounces. I'll never forget the picture that Albert sent when he took his wedding ring and it would fit all the way to his shoulder. For months, I saw Landon and Albert pray over their baby. And one of the happiest days was the day he got to come home. And I was there with them. I got to spend the first night holding him for the first time and looked in his beautiful little eyes, and he fought so hard to get there. His 11 years did have impact. And I want us to remember Gannon as who he was, not what this evil deed did to his memory. He is our hero and will always be our hero. Letecia tried to steal many things from my niece. She called her a drug addict. She called her homeless when she was in the hospital having her third child. She was there for months and months trying to save her life and her baby. She wasn't homeless. Landon's a good mother. She loved her children. And she loved Gannon. And her only son was taken away by someone who was just ferociously jealous of my niece. With all that being said, I pray that you will give her the sentence that she deserves. But I also pray that God will forgive her if she repents and turns from her evil ways.
All right. Thank you.
We are watching the sentencing phase in the murder trial of Letecia Stauch, and family members and community members reminding us that murders have many, many victims, and speaking very poignantly and emotionally about the effect that this particular murder had on them. We'll have more of this on the other side, so keep it right here on Court TV.
It's the case that's captivated the nation.
The Doomsday cult mom murder trial.
And Court TV is there with multiple ways to listen.
Money, power, and sex. That's what this case is about.
Hear all the biggest moments on our daily Court TV podcast. Join the conversation on our YouTube page and follow every dramatic turn on CourtTV.com.
No cameras in the courtroom, but Court TV has you covered.
Go in depth on the Doomsday cult mom murder trial with Court TV.
back. I'm Ashley Wilcott with Michael Ayala, listening to very difficult sentencing victim impact statements being given in the case against Letecia Stauch, now a convicted murderer of her 11-year-old stepson, Gannon. Hard to listen to, but really it's not about just the youngest victim. It's all of the other victims that are a result of the death of Gannon Stauch. Really, really just a horrible tragedy. I just want to get your thoughts quickly, Jack Rice, Josh Schiffer, about this sentencing phase and what everyone has to say before we get right back into the courtroom.
Well, you know,
I didn't do that well. Let me start with Jack. Sorry, gentlemen, I just threw it to both of you, which doesn't work on TV.
When I look at this, the country is tearing itself to pieces politically, economically, socially, emotionally. All of those things seem to be going on. And the one thing that can bind us together is the belief that due process actually exists in this country. And the idea that we're all treated equally and that we are all equal before the law. The idea that all of these people can come together and watch this process work, that due process can work, and that they can stand up and say what has happened to them and what this means. And to thank the judge, to thank the court for what they have done is an extraordinary thing. And frankly, it's one of the few things in this country, when it works right, that we can actually sit back and say, this is extraordinary. And when we think about this case and we think about what has happened, this is an extraordinary moment in one little case, in one little corner of America, about one little boy, and yet the entire country is watching this, and we're focused on this with such a laser focus because this is all of us collectively, and it is a marvelous thing to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, what are your thoughts before we go back in?
Yeah, from the meta to much more the personal, I like following up on what Michael was talking about, how these cases, these murders, they affect hundreds of people. It's not just the main stakeholders. There are people who've been traumatized, affected, have been emotionally involved throughout this community. The community is much larger than people think. And I'm really moved by how compassionate and considerate the judge is being, providing the patient venue for these individuals to come up and do some public speaking, something that's really important for closure, the therapy. It's so meaningful, and I really am glad that's happening here and that we get to see it.
Yeah, no question about it. I just quickly got to mention that when Janie Cadenas said Gannon wasn't just a neighbor, he was all of our little boys, I think that captured it perfectly. And I think it expands beyond that community, all the people who really got invested in this trial. Yeah. Jack Rice, Josh Schiffer, thanks to those guys for joining us as always. They're wonderful as always. I want to take you guys back into the courtroom for more of the victim impact statements in the case of Letecia Stauch.
My name is Bob Rogers, B-O-B, R-O-G-E-R-S. My wife Patty and I are grandparents to Lena and Gannon, who we never had the opportunity to meet in person. Over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of tears and challenges with Al, of who hopefully helped him walk through this tragedy. The person that comes to mind for me is Lena. Lena is Gannon's younger sister. And we have the opportunity to be grandparents to her. And she's a beautiful child. She sings beautifully. She's talented. What she doesn't have is an older brother to stand beside her as she goes through her life. She still mentions Gannon quite often, her brother. We never want the spirit of Gannon or the memory of Gannon to be lost. So I just am a loss for words. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
I am Deborah Pierce, Pearce. Sorry. Gannon's grandmother. And I just wanted to thank you, first of all, Your Honor, for this court and everything that's been done, for everyone who has so carefully and impartially cared for this case, for this loss of this precious child. And I feel that if Gannon were here today, he would say, please, please protect my family and be concerned for the loss that they've had. This has gone from my children to my grandchildren, little children who lost a cousin who never understood why something like this could happen. If he were here today, he would say, please take care of my family. Make sure that they're protected as time goes on and as this life goes on. And obviously, to help us to go forward in this life. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, Your Honor. My name is Landon Bullard, also referred to as Hyatt in this case, but Bullard's Bullard. I miss you, Gannon, and I love you to the moon and back again. I know every day you're with me and your sisters, but that will never be taken away. The ache that I have for you, to hold you, to hug you, to tell you how much I love you, and to see your smile and your innocence. I remember all the pain your dad and I suffered with having children. It was never easy, and we were always fearful through the process. On September the 29th, 2008, our lives were forever changed. Our first biggest blessing came into the world, weighing only 1 pound and 6 ounces. You fought all the odds and developed a personality and a smile that's larger than life. You became my hero that day. You forever changed my heart and my life, and that will never change. That is...
Michael, this is really hard to listen to. It's excruciating, the pain that this has caused to so many in the community.
But how important it is that they get the opportunity to do this.
Yeah, right.
We get reminded every time, and it's always difficult. All right, we'll take a break. We'll get you back into that courtroom. We're hitting Dreamcatcher. You will not miss a thing. Keep it here on Court TV. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala.
And I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott. After nearly 8 hours of deliberations, a jury in Colorado found Letecia Stauch guilty of all 4 charges in the murder of her 11-year-old stepson, Gannon.
With respect to count number 1, charge of murder in the first degree after deliberation, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 1, murder in the first degree after deliberation. With respect to count number 2, charge of murder in the first degree, child under 12 by a person in a position of trust, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 2, murder in the first degree, child under 12, position of trust. With respect to count number 3, charge of tampering with a deceased human body, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 3, tampering with a deceased human body. With respect to count number 4, charge of tampering with physical evidence, we, the jury, find the defendant Letecia Stauch guilty of count number 4, tampering with physical evidence.
Now, Stauch had pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but the jury didn't buy it. Stauch was relatively emotionless as the verdict was read, somewhat surprisingly. Now, after the verdict, the sentencing phase began after a short 30-minute break. Court is still in session at this hour, so I do want to get you right back into court for more of the Letecia Stauch sentencing.
We came into this world fighting. And unfortunately, you left this world fighting. Your Honor, she fought against someone that he loved and trusted. Someone that myself and Albert both trusted and loved. Someone who can never understand what it means to love or trust anyone but herself. For more than 3 agonizing years, I've often wondered what I may say. Or if I would even be able to. For 3 years, I have questioned every single possibility and scenario. For 3 years, I have tried to forgive you, but I can't. I want to. But no parent should have to bury their child. No parent should have to see or hear the horrific things you have done to the whole family. She has taken away the most precious gift in this world. Not just my family, not Al's family, but your own family. She destroyed dozens of lives of people who never wanted to believe that she could have done this. She knew how special Gannon was, and she knew what meant to most to me. I, in my heart, can never understand her hatred and insecurities. When it came to me, I did love her. Mother to mother, I trusted her with my children while trying to survive a complicated life with my 3rd child. And she used every opportunity to write a narrative of my life to try to take pieces of my life. When she already took some of it, that still wasn't enough. She searched. I lost my place. I don't know where I'm at now. She searched so hard for love when all along she had it, but she took it for granted. I didn't hold anger against you then. I still kept my heart open to her. You had so much love from Lena and Gannon, from Harley, her own daughter, that you willingly subjected to the chance of serving time for her crimes. Such an indicator of her inability to love anyone herself. You had support, appreciation for me, even when we couldn't see eye to eye, because I valued her for helping me with our children when I physically couldn't. Even when I was fighting for my kids, as you wrote, a false smear campaign against me and my children, and also Al. For me, I still appreciated that they were loved by you. So I thought. She had everyone fooled. She projected abuse and addiction claims against all of us, not just me, when all along she was the one harming innocent children. Anything to take the light off. manipulating us, breaking my kids, and murdering my son. I can't say that she ruined my life because that will be some form of sick victory for her. Because even through this process, it's been a game to her. The people who listened doesn't know her style or her sly jabs. She's even made at Albert and I. They do not know the significance of certain things she says or does. But we do. Instead of allowing her to take that power of hurting me further, I wanted to tell you this. Let me tell you what Gannon has done. Even to this day, even after you murdered him and she tried to taint any positive image of him, he has caused families and communities to come together. Children and adults have given their life to Christ. He has called unity in times of trial. He is a hero. She even tried to steal that away. A cape, huh? The one image of Gannon that was created for the world. After it went national, TV begging for the return of my son, my hero. How dare her? How truly sick and cruel is she? You stole so much from this world. Gannon's cousins, aunts, uncles, sisters, new siblings, grandparents, and friends are missing a huge portion of their lives without Gannon. Lena is missing her brother. Your Honor, I've never seen a bond between two siblings so close as theirs. She had to take that. Why? I'm afraid we may never know that answer, will we? I show his baby sister, Nova, pictures and videos of Gannon so she will always remember who he is, because she stole him from us. He is not forgotten and never will be. And it's so sad to sit here today and face her, a person even Gannon loved, one that I know while she was attacking and killing him and fought for his life, he defended himself against her, still loving her. A love she never deserved from him for what she has done. While she is too much of a coward to even come forward with the truth, she owes it to Gannon. But the lack of remorse and the lack of respect to Gannon through this child, her lack of compassion shows me that she and we were all wrong. She manipulated all of us, and never loved Gannon, Lena, or Harley. I've sat here for over a month having to listen to her sick lies, even as she tried to destroy who I was and Albert as a father. I've had to sit and listen and watch every reenactment of images no one wants left in their mind. You wanted to leave us with that, knowing it would torture us, but you underestimated me. I am Landon, Gannon's mom, and that will never change. Through my hurt, anger, and pain, I will never be the monster that she is. I can never be filled with the hate that her heart holds. I pray that we will never have to look at her face again. I will continue to hold on to my faith. Vengeance is not mine, as I surely wish it could be at times, but it's the Lord's. I have to trust in that. Thank you, Judge Warner, for your compassion, your patience through this trial. I want to thank the juror for their attentiveness and time that they took for justice for my boy, to the detectives, officers, legal team for every single second they've poured out into Gannon's case, and to the community for your countless hours. Tisha, that was her biggest mistake. You underestimated this community and this defensive team, Lorson Ranch. They searched for and fought for Gannon within hours, and they never believed your lies from the moment they started. None of these people ever gave up on him. You never looked. All of these people I will forever hold close to my heart. Always Gannon strong. My G-men forever. Justice has been served today. Your Honor, I pray that you just give her the best sentencing, the longest sentencing that you can. This will not bring my son back, but I can sleep soundly for the first time in 3 years, knowing that you can never harm, this defendant can never harm anyone again, knowing Gannon will always be a true hero in a cape. He will always be my son. That will never be taken away.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Allen?
Once I was 7 years old, my mama told me, go Make yourself some friends or you'll be lonely. Once I was 7 years old. Do, 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 do. It was a big, big world, but we thought we were bigger. Pushing each other to the limits, we were learning quicker.
Al Stauch, Gannon's father, capital F-A-T-H-E-R. Last name Stauch. S-T-A-U-C-H. I'm going to start with something from my wife, not to go out of order, but she didn't think she could make it through it. So this is my wife, Melissa, and these are her words. Some may say or think that I wouldn't be here if it weren't for Tisha. In part, that may be accurate, and I would be okay with that, because then Gannon would still be here. I, too, know the pain of losing a child, and there is no greater pain. We are now lifelong grief partners, as this is a lifelong journey of pain with 2 sons waiting for us in heaven. I have some words from my daughter, Elena. I will address in the middle of my speech, but they're written in yellow, so I don't know if I can leave it to a child. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever God may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of the wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years shall find me unafraid. It matters not how straight the gate, how charged with punishment the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. The poem I read is named Invictus, translated from the Latin means unconquerable. I quoted this same poem at Gannon's memorial here in Colorado Springs back in August of 2020. Why August of 2020? When his body was ripped to shreds on January 27th? Well, as we heard testimony to, his body was found 1,370 miles away. And then the process to identify his maggot-infested remains withheld him from us until July 2020. As I stated in my testimony on the stand, Gannon was born severely premature and barely filled my 2 hands the first time I held him. At the end of his life, after his body was cremated into a pile of ashes, he was ultimately no bigger than the first time I held him. As brutal as the wait became, I'm thankful to God and the bridge workers for finding him and returning his precious body to Landon and I quote the poem Invictus again, not to boast of my strength and perseverance, Your Honor, but to say to the world, I alone can control my actions and reactions. Your Honor, I refuse to allow anger to poison my soul and orient my life to a pursuit of vengeance. I refuse to allow pain to carry me through each day and promote the pursuit of medicinal retribution toward the offender. I refuse also to let my mind be clouded by inconsistency and emotions that deter me from the purpose in this life. Your Honor, the price I pay each and every day for this resolve is to only get pieces and parts of my son.
Right, Al Stauch there, simultaneously showing strength, tremendous strength, but also tremendous emotion in the loss of his son. And I just have to mention, he said, you know, I'm embarking now on a lifelong journey of pain with 2 sons waiting for us, meaning him and his current wife in heaven. She actually lost a child as well. Just devastating. We're going to have more of his victim impact statement when we come back. Keep it here on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, unpacking the bizarre allegations in the Doomsday cult mom murder trial. Cult-like religious beliefs surround Lori Vallow Daybell as she stands trial for the murders of her 2 children. You'll hear the latest audio from inside the courtroom as we bring in experts to break it all down. Plus, live updates from Boise, Idaho on the most compelling moments from today's testimony.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan, tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
And welcome back. We want to get you back into court for the sentencing phase. We know Letecia Stauch is a convicted murderer of Gannon, her stepson, 11 years old, when he was murdered by Letecia Stauch. Now, the sentencing, we've hit the pause button so we can take you back in. I just have to comment, though, Michael, on something that Gannon's mother, Landon, said. She said Gannon has caused families and communities to come together, adults and children alike. He's a hero. And now we're hearing from Al Stauch. And, you know, I can barely sit here and hold it together just listening. I can't imagine what any of these individuals have gone through. But he is talking about his son and how it's affected him. Let's get you back into the courtroom.
Inconsistently through time. But the pain is too heavy, and the anger too overwhelming, and the desire for vengeance too vexing. Instead, each and every day I pursue peace. I seek joy in my life and let the love I have for my wife and family flow in and out of me like a mighty wave. As I told Tisha regularly at the end of our relationship, my joy is mine alone, and she cannot rob me of that. I will learn to experience G more and more as time goes on, but as I did my best to instill into his precious soul, love, joy, service, and kindness are the pathway to take in life. This picture shows that in the 4th grade, he already had a mind for service. Throughout these past 3 years since Gannon was beaten and drugged, carved up, shot at point-blank range and discarded like yesterday's garbage, I've encountered many people that would figuratively do the same to me. I have been questioned, compared as Tisha did to my abusive father, and ridiculed for my approach to finding Gannon. I hope now that the world has seen that I was assigned the most arduous task of finding Gannon in the only place that was possible for him to have been, in the mind of a killer. Were my efforts fruitful? I believe so. But from the moment I did not see the Volkswagen Tiguan, or however you say it, at French Elementary on that Tuesday evening, a clear direction for finding Gannon pointed directly and precisely at Tisha. While others online, some who are even in the courtroom today, questioned my perceived lack of effort or concern, I stood still and stood firm in knowing that only one person had the information needed to find Gannon. Now I say woe to the person who questions a father's resolve when the safety and well-being of his children are at stake. I did not waver. I did not falter in the pursuit, nor did I allow the mentality of the mob to shake me. But it was only by the grace of God that Gannon's precious body was finally found. In Mark 4:39 of the Bible, in the middle of a storm, Christ arose and rebuked the wind and said, "Peace, be still." In times of trial in my life, from seeing my father being taken away in handcuffs, to seeing that sweet 1 pound, 6 ounce baby boy for my firstborn son being put into a Ziploc bag after he was born to help regulate his body temperature, and now searching for and never finding my son again, I have but one choice, and that is the times of trial and tribulation, to have that peace and be still. As I alluded to previously, that stillness does provide an easy target for many who do not understand peace, hope, and even faith. Some, including Tisha, feasted on my stillness, attacked, and yes, left several scars. One of these scars comes in the form of the financial and residential ruin that began in the early days of this ordeal. I'm just going to skip this part because I don't want to make this any more about me. I'm not seeking any restitution, Your Honor. For the $1.50 a month I receive from the defendant, Tisha, would just keep me connected to her for the rest of my life, and I don't want that. So absolutely no restitution, Your Honor. The murderer of which I speak was not always such. When I met Tisha, she was beautiful, extremely intelligent, as many have testified to, and a seemingly successful woman. A far cry from the nappy-headed, murderous, narcissistic, and arrogantly flippant human being that sits in our midst today. Having a background in teaching, social work, higher education, certified babysitting, and endless amount of credentials, that should render one trustworthy when it relates to the safety of children. However, although she remains too much a coward to state the facts of what she did to Gannon, too much a lily-livered, self-centered, pathological liar to ask for forgiveness, and too much the facade of one who actually cares for others to have taken her frustration out on an adult or one who could defend themselves, she will one day give an account through her words or through her time. Sending pictures of Gannon sleeping to Landon and I was telling, as the boy looked pale and absent of the energies that so defined him. This is what a happy, healthy little boy looks like when he's sleeping. The next picture. That's what a little boy sleeping looks like. These pictures on the screen are of a happy, healthy little boy that's sleeping sweetly, healthily where he lay. The impact Tisha had as a result of this heinous crime stretches far wider and far deeper than I could depict through my statement today. 2 other people torn to pieces as a result of this are Gannon's sister, Lena, and Harley. Speaking of Harley, I feel as though I've lost 2 children as a result of this tragedy. One of which I will never see on this earth again, and the other which I do not know if a relationship can be salvaged with. Now for Lena. The video you saw as submitted in evidence, her bebopping down the street, is actually an excellent depiction of Lena and her happiness and her joy in life. She is very loving, trusting, and at times way too social. Normally, you might be concerned by your little girl talking to the utility guy working in the front yard, but in this case, it was the inside of her own home that was of grave concern. Nonetheless, her loss, Lena's loss, is like none I can even imagine. She lost her big brother, her only brother at the time. I still do not know if she has fully processed or fully understands the gravity of the situation, but regardless has pressed forward and is thriving as best as she can. I am so proud of her. And these are her words. Once again, they're in yellow, so I'll do the best I can. And this is what I asked her if she wanted to say anything to Tisha, and this is what she said in her sweetest mind that she has. That you do not do that to people, especially your stepkids. And that it is never all right to do these things. How sweeter of a response can you get? Now for my precious, premature firstborn son. Get it? I never in my wildest dreams would have ever thought you'd be in danger, buddy, or I know I wouldn't have not left you. At home with what turned out to be your murderer and the last person to ever see you on this earth. I'm so sorry. Through a father's eyes, children are truly a gift from God and among the best and most perfect creations God can make. Your Honor, I do need to clear one thing up with the defense. It was said both in the opening statement and in the closing, somehow Gannon has been compared to a demon. And I understand the process, I do. But if they want to take the case up of Gannon being a demon, I will line people up from Alaska to Denver to Colorado Springs, all the way to South Carolina to testify against them. Gannon was nobody's demon. I don't care how much anyone was abused or anything, he was not anyone's demon. Oh, okay. Gannon was truly my buddy. Very recently, before he died, the most alarming thing he did was call me dad. Up until age 10 or 11, I was daddy. But in the last months of his life, I was just dad. A signal that he was coming into those junior high, pre-teenage years. Another amazing thing that is he finally started asking me regularly to play ball with him. He was never too much into sports for most of his life, but that last 6 to 9 months, he really started enjoying playing ball. Some of the most memorable times were him running little 5-yard football routes in the street in front of our house. Most of the time he dropped the ball, but he kept asking, let's do it again. I almost had it that time, Daddy. Oh, and that Nintendo Switch. One of the most difficult pieces of evidence to give up was his Nintendo, because that probably has the most of him on it. Knowing I may never see that again is truly devastating. For him, many of his games were not just games, but a challenge to overcome, as I made him beat specific games before I would buy him the next one. I remember not long before he died, him beating the old school Zelda game he had. As he felt he was getting close to beating the final monster, he paused it, ran upstairs, and we sat at the kitchen island, and he beat it right there together with me. He was as excited as I ever saw him. With all of that and all of the pain of only being able to see him play through the one YouTube video he was able to make, which I'm about to play, I can sleep in peace at night because the father I am and the son he is was culminated as always in our final embrace as he ran out of arms and downstairs to watch Pokemon, I in his heart and he in mine. If we could try to play that video, just maybe the first 10 or 15 seconds of it.
Hey guys, and today I'm about to play some Sonic Mania. Alright, let's zoom in. And yes, cameraman is right here. Grandpa Star White Gaming. And yes, sign up for our channels. We're going to be doing a lot of these together. Give a shout out to him, his channel, Freedom.
Thank you. I was one of the many he hoped to make and the only one he was actually able to make. I do want to add something that I don't have in my speech that me and Landon already had a conversation about this, and I owe her an apology as well as she already gave me one, that we allowed Tisha to manipulate us into some of the pain and disagreements that we had between one another. And Landon, I'm sorry. But I will say this, Tisha was not the glue to keep everything together. She was not the answer. And this is not a jab, Landon, okay? But Lena still lives with me. Tisha, you were not the answer. Now, Your Honor, if I have any influence on the final sentence for Tisha, first I ask to be stripped of my last name immediately. It's nauseating and infuriating to hear her called Miss Stauch this past 3 years. Secondly, I ask that for every mile she drove Gannon across the country, she spent 1 day in solitary confinement. I think that take us in between 3 and 4 years. After that journey is complete, I recommend her sentence be equal to every year she stripped off of Gannon's life, which for the average male in America right now is 77. So that would give her 66 more years, in addition to the 11 he lived. Lastly, for every year of Harley's life that she abusively manipulated that child, she should have an additional year of prison. That adds 21 years to the total. I think without parole, that should suffice. I pray also that Tisha lives the fullest and happiest life that any inmate possibly can live. I also pray that every night before she falls asleep, her last breath before she drifts off sounds just like the breath that she describes Gannon breathing as life left his body.
All right, the pain of a father on full display there. And a little point that jumped out at me, he said, you know, hearing her called Mrs. Stauch just like darts in his heart. And I didn't even think of that. But the last thing he wants is this woman to still carry his last name. So interesting points there. Talking about the sentence here is already predetermined. She will get life without the possibility of parole. But we'll have more of her sentencing here when we come back. So keep it right here on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, unpacking the bizarre allegations in the Doomsday cult mom murder trial. Cult-like religious beliefs surround Lori Vallow Daybell as she stands trial for the murders of her 2 children. You'll hear the latest audio from inside the courtroom as we bring in experts to break it all down. Plus, live updates from Boise, Idaho on the most compelling moments from today's testimony.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan, tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Judge Ashley Wilcott.
And I'm Michael Ayala.
In the Doomsday cult mom murder trial, the state could soon wrap up its case in chief. On the stand for a good part of today was Detective Doug Hart.
Now, his testimony continued from last Friday about info that he got from Lori Daybell's iCloud account. And he continued to detail disturbing texts between Lori, Chad, Daybell. Now, part of those texts went into great detail about JJ and who they called his evil spirit, someone by the name of Blake. Now, in the text, Lori tells Chad JJ was saying crazy stuff and wouldn't go to sleep. Well, they communicated about JJ being partly through the veil and talking to people both light and dark.
It sounds crazy, but this is what these texts said that they're presenting as evidence. And ahead at the top of the hour, we'll take you back to Boise for a live report from our own Chanley Painter on the latest from inside that courtroom. Now, we do want to turn back to the sentencing hearing of Letecia Stauch in the stepmom murder trial. A jury convicted Stauch on all 4 counts in the murder of her 11-year-old stepson, Gannon.
Now, we've been listening to victim impact statements. Al Stauch, Gannon's father, is the last family member to speak. So let's get back to court for his final words.
Me and other places we went throughout our time together. And then every morning as she is about to wake, the end of her dream, the last words Gannon spoke to her, screamed or cried, "Tisha, stop. You're hurting me. Why, Tisha? Daddy, help me. I want my mommy. Why couldn't you let her just be a mama's boy? That's all he wanted to be. He just loved his mama. I wish she would tell me what those words were so I would know." And then as she speaks those words, the sound of a gunshot goes off and she wakes. Every day and night, I pray she relives just those moments and then wakes up to a nice, warm, and kosher breakfast. In conclusion, I would like to share a picture of Gannon in his final state and find a resting place, and thank everyone that has had a positive impact on my family and I. To everyone that has shared the positive impact Gannon has had on your life, from a proud and broken father, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you. I'd like to pause until we can get that last photo up.
Not getting a feed from your laptop. It's fine. Oh, there it is.
Thank you, everyone.
I think that concludes the comments from family and friends, Judge. So I'm not sure if you're ready to hear sentencing comments from me or if you want to do a different process.
Let me hear the sentencing comments from you. The last person that I always hear from in a sentencing is the defendant. So,
okay. Can I have just a moment, please?
You may, go ahead.
Yeah, just in the abundance of caution, I would ask the court to keep restitution open for a period of time. Obviously, Mr. Stauch is not asking for any restitution, but there may be some that we want to submit, and so I would ask the court to keep that open.
Well, based on the new case regarding timelines, I'm going to give you 49 days to submit an order.
Thank you.
If there is an objection, you'll need to file the objection within 14 days after that. That'll get us all right. So 49 days, 14 if there's an objection, and if there is, we'll have a hearing.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Judge, I'm not going to make a long drawn-out statement. I think the comments from the family and friends of the Stauch family said it better than I ever could about the impact that Gannon had on their lives, the loss of.
You know, just a reminder that the prosecutor as well as the defense team has an opportunity to also address the court regarding the sentencing, and that's what we're seeing now as the prosecutor. We're going to hit the pause button. When we come back, we'll get you back into the courtroom to see what else the prosecutor and then the defense has to say.
Will Letecia Stauch speak?
That's a great question. Will Letecia Stauch speak? Stay tuned.
911, what's your emergency? I think with their gunshots outside. They were celebrating graduation, but this party quickly turned tragic.
No one understood how these three boys could have been targeted for such a heinous crime.
A dispute left 3 teenagers dead and a community shaken to its core.
Why, after that many years, did they become willing to state what had happened? Why didn't you go to police then?
I was scared of Brandon.
Someone They Knew with Tamron Hall tonight, 7/6 Central on Court TV.
All right. Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm sorry to step over you, but we are back here at Court TV Live. We're bringing you the sentencing hearing of Letecia Stauch. Now, Letecia Stauch was found guilty in the murder of her 11-year-old stepson, Gannon. Guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder, murder in the first degree of a child less than 12-year-old, etc. She had tried to convince the jury that she was suffering from a psychosis, dissociative disorder. The jury rejected that and again found her guilty on all counts. So before we go back to court, I do want to bring in psychotherapist Dr. Janie Lacey, as well as criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Marie Pereira, who have been watching along graciously. Marie, I'll start with you. I know you've been very passionate about this case. And earlier, the judge and I were talking about the fact that when the guilty verdicts came back, there almost seemed to be a collective sigh. People thankful that this jury came back with this guilty verdict. Love to get your thoughts.
I was nervous that they took so long. If you remember, I said that the closing from the defense attorney was so impactful that even I thought, who does something like that? Someone who's insane. And I thought that, you know what, it could have gone the other way. But her using dissociative identity disorder is what literally did her in, along with her irrational but very depraved, insane post-crime cover-up. I'm glad the jurors were able to see that, and I'm happy with the verdict.
Yeah, I would agree. I think a lot of what she did after the murder did play into this guilty verdict on all 4 counts. All right, Dr. Lacey, one of the things I noticed that both the mother, Landon, or the mother of Gannon, and the father, Al, said was she manipulated all of us. And then the mother went one step further and said, you underestimated this community. That manipulation, talk to us a little bit about that and your opinion of her mental health or the verdict in this case.
Well, we can listen to the parents and our heart goes out to them, right? We cannot sit here and be emotional, healthy in our mental health and not feel their pain. And when we step back and we look at what she has done, right? When we look at these personalities and coming in and pretending and putting on this front to kind of come into their lives and have these duality, the person that they thought they knew, but then there is this person who's also capable of this. It's hard for people to hold those two things in the same place. So as we watch the family and tell their story and tell their experiences with her and ultimately live and to create this legacy for their son and that he was a hero in bringing the community together, because our hearts go out to this family, and to know that this 11-year-old's last time was with someone who he completely trusted is hard for people to reconcile that.
Oh, thank you so much for your thoughts, for both of you, for staying with us. We do need to get back into the courtroom. Right now, we're hearing from the district attorney, who has the opportunity to make some remarks about sentencing. Let's get you right back where we left off.
Well, will never be made right through this process. We all know that. The defendant, through her own actions, tore Gannon's family apart, tore this community apart. And at the same time, I've never seen a community come together the way this community did in the face of such tragedy over an 11-year-old boy who most of us never knew. The defendant manipulated this community, Gannon's family, the investigation. I've been a prosecutor for a long time, Judge. You've seen a lot of cases. I've never seen the kind of horror that this defendant brought down on a community and a family. The torture that Gannon had to suffer in the last moments of his life are unspeakable. No matter what sentence you give us, Judge, and I know what that sentence is going to be for the most part, no matter what the sentence is, we'll never bring Gannon back. But it will go a long ways towards healing this community. I hope healing Landon. I hope healing Al. They're going to live the rest of their lives second guessing every decision they made as it relates to leaving their children in the care of this defendant through no fault of their own. Judge, on count 1 and count 2 merges into count 1. The only sentence available is life in prison without parole. As to count 4, tampering with a deceased human body, driving Gannon's body over 1,300 miles away, hiding it from view, hoping it would never be found, ask for the maximum sentence of 12 years, Judge, and that it be running consecutive to the life in prison without parole. Tampering with physical evidence is an F6. It's 1 to 1.5 years. I ask that you give max on that as well and run that consecutive. Judge, we do have that other pending case, 20 CR 3170, hanging out there. In the grand scheme of things, well, I'd love to prosecute this defendant for that charge as well. In the interest of justice, I would like to see this defendant in Department of Corrections custody as soon as possible. And so we are dismissing that count or that charge. Thank you, Judge.
All right, at this point in time, the defense has an opportunity to present statements in mitigation. Mr. Tellini.
We understand what sentence is as a matter of law. It's out on some counsel. I don't have pre-sentence confinement. Court staff said she ordered this should be allowed to proceed in.
Give me an order.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Ms. Stauch, I heard what your attorney had to say, but I need to hear it from you. You have a right to address the court at this point in time regarding any matter that you want me to consider for sentencing. Do you have anything that you wish for me to consider, ma'am? All right.
Actually, there is.
Go ahead.
Consider this or request to admit proof, like to request for her to be placed in San Carlos.
I don't have the ability to do that. DOC determines where its inmates go, and I'm not going to make a recommendation one way or the other.
All right, I have to leave, but Michael Ayala, your show coming up next. Hard to understand what she said. What are you bringing us?
Woman of a million words, didn't have much to say. I think she was asking for a certain placement. That tells you everything you need to know. All right, Judge, great to be with you. Coming up next, after finding Letecia Stauch guilty on all counts, the court moved right into the sentencing phase. Court is still in session at this hour. We'll get you back in for more of the sentencing hearing right after the break. Keep it here on Court TV.
So you can live your life spam call free. Download RoboKiller today.
Hello, and welcome back to Court TV Live. My name is Michael Ayala, and it's been an incredible day here at Court TV. Just a couple of hours ago, Letecia Stauch was found guilty of all charges in the case in the killing of her 11-year-old stepson, Gannon. But before I get you back out there for the sentencing of Letecia Gannon, I do want to take you out to Idaho, Boise, Idaho, where, of course, Court TV legal correspondent Shanley Painter is standing by with an update from the case we've been watching as well, that involving Lori Vallow-Daybell. Get us caught up on where we are today. Detective Hart on the stand most of the day. Incredible information coming from Lori's iCloud. Tell us about a little bit of it.
Yeah, great to be with you, Michael. The day just wrapped here in Boise with the detective leading the stand. He actually had cross and a little bit of a redirect. Ultimately, his major conclusions are very clear for this jury in that through all these thousands of messages that he never once noted that Lori Vallow-Daybell objected to any of the speak of her children being dark or the death percentages of her children, that after her children went missing, she never did anything affirmatively to look for her children, and that the romantic relationship in the view of this lead agent was the driving force behind all of the alleged crimes before this jury. So at the end of this afternoon, we were in that timeline towards November 2019. Along the way, he covered, of course, the messages surrounding Tammy Daybell's death. This stood out to me. The day after Tammy died, of course, Chad and Lori are immediately texting one another romantically, and this line was read for the jury where Chad tells Lori October 20th, 2019, "I'm feeling sad, but not for the reason everyone thinks," meaning that he can't really be with Lori just yet. Also in October, 3 days later, Lori and Chad are texting about Alex Cox. Lori says, "I had a bad dream about Al. Make sure he is still him and protect him. He would be the one they," meaning law enforcement, "would use to get to us both. All this alone time is not good for him." Prosecutors setting that up to speak about how Lori and Chad then worked to arrange a marriage between one of the other members of their inner circles, Lema Pastenes, and then, of course, Alex Cox passes away in December 2019. But chilling messages, Michael, about the children, Tylee and JJ, leading up to their deaths, with Chad and Lori communicating about the obstacles, overcoming them as barriers to being together. Of course, both believe they were possessed by dark spirits. There's one about Tylee from July 23rd, 2019 that this jury read and saw on the big screen. Says Lori says, "When you get home, check Tylee. She's being super sweet and helpful, and she cleaned her room. She has got to be switched totally, not her." Lori says, "We are both so tired of taking care of demons. We are weary. Please ask the Lord to take them." So she's asking the Lord to take her children from her. And then they discuss JJ Vallow's death percentages, that he's almost, Lori was upset that he wasn't at 0 just yet, meaning that she wanted him to allegedly die. In August 10th, 2019, Lori says, "Do you think there is a perfectly orchestrated plan to take the children and we just have to wait for it to be carried out?" Chad replies, "There is a plan being orchestrated for the children. I was shown last night how it fit together, but it's been taken from my mind, of course." In all of this, the theme is from prosecutors, Lori initiated the conversation about her children, and Lori wanted to take steps in furtherance of that plan, orchestrated plan. And then finally, on September 3rd, 2019, there was talk between Alex and Lori about the Wi-Fi passcode and about zombies, that Lori was working on zombies. And Alex texts her the Wi-Fi passcode is too many kids. And then Lori says this, "We are trying to get to the bottom of what we need to do to eliminate them," meaning zombies, completely. "I'm sure you will be told also." Alex says, "Excellent." And how chilling that was just days before prosecutors say Tylee Ryan was murdered. And of course, a couple of weeks before, they say JJ Vallow was also murdered, and they did see this jury the last. We thought it was a photo, but today, Michael, we actually see the video of JJ in those red PJs. It's a 3 to 4 second video. It's the last known video in Lori's iCloud of JJ playing with the cup on the couch there. You can kind of hear his voice for a few seconds. And the overall theme that this investigator left for this jury is that in this iCloud, that there's no more communications or videos. There were tons of videos before the children went missing. And then suddenly, September 8th and 9th, no more of Tylee. September 23rd, 24th, nothing more of JJ Vallow. Really a way to really put these pieces together for the jury coming up tomorrow. A couple of more witnesses, Michael, for the prosecution, another lead investigator, possibly from the AG's office, to, again, it seems like wrap this case in chief before we shall see what the defense does.
All right, Shanley Painter, thank you so much for that report. Truly appreciate another big day out there in Boise, Idaho. But right now, I want to take you folks back out to Colorado in the trial of Letecia Stauch. Just earlier today, a couple of hours ago, after about 8 hours of deliberations, a jury found her guilty of all charges, including murder in the first degree and murder in the first degree of a child less than 12 years old. She is going to get life in prison without parole. That is a done deal. But there were victim impact statements, some very poignant ones, particularly from Gannon's mother as well as his father, Al Stauch, who we've heard a lot of and heard testify in the trial. Right now, I want to take you back into that courtroom. The judge, Gregory Werner, is beginning his soliloquy. He is going to pronounce sentence. He has a few things to say to the court, so let's get back into that courtroom.
A parent's worst nightmare is getting a phone call letting them know that something has happened to their child. How much worse must that nightmare be when law enforcement asks not for a picture of your loved one, but rather DNA and dental records? I've also heard it said that one of the worst tragedies a parent can experience is to outlive a child. I have known people, both professionally and personally, who have gone through that. It never leaves them, but the sharpness of the pain does diminish to some extent over time. I cannot fathom the pain Mr. Stauch and Ms. Bullard have experienced as a result of the defendant's actions. A sentence in a criminal case such as this will not change the fact that their son's life was taken from them, and no sentence I impose and nothing I say will ever change that fact. Ms. Stauch, you betrayed the person you loved enough to marry. You told your husband lies and took away someone he loved. You took away every day that Mr. Stauch or Ms. Bullard could have had with their son. When you take a life, regardless of how you do that, you forever alter the future. Neither Mr. Stauch nor Ms. Bullard will ever see their son graduate from high school, go through the joy and the pain of that first love, or get married. They will never know what kind of impact their son may have had on the world if only he had lived to become an adult. And had Gannon's body not been found, they never would have known what happened to Gannon. They would always have had a lingering doubt about what happened to Gannon. And I cannot imagine the pain and sense of loss associated with that. You betrayed your daughter, Harley Hunt. I cannot imagine the emotional impact that you have had on her due to your selfish and calculated actions. This is a young woman that trusted you to put her interests above yours. This is a young woman who believed in you and believed you were innocent of this crime right up until the time that you pled not guilty by reason of insanity. And she still loves you. That's natural for a child, and it doesn't matter how much older they get. You were supposed to protect her. I cannot imagine the guilt she feels or the therapy that she will need to address your portrayal. There is no evidence that she had anything to do with the murder or your cover-up of it, but some people still think that she is somehow involved. She wasn't. The incredible strength of will and courage that it took for her to come in and testify is amazing to me. But she did it because, as she said, it was the right thing to do. And while thankfully she didn't testify, let's not forget about Lena. You betrayed her too. You took her brother from her and forever altered her family dynamics. She will always wonder who she can trust and will always feel that loss. She was there the day you killed Gannon. His body was still in the house when she got back from school. At some point, you even claimed this 8-year-old girl helped you move her brother's body from the basement to the back of your car. That's just simply not true. As she gets older, Lena is going to want to know more, and she's going to want to know if there was something that she could have done to prevent this. I hope she comes to realize that she has no fault in all of this. You betrayed your stepson, and you took his life. You took away everything he was and everything he could ever become. I can't imagine the terror and confusion that he must have felt in the last moments of his life when he knew his life was being taken by someone he trusted to protect it. Your attempt to raise the claim that you did this because of your adverse childhood is also a betrayal of people that have mental health issues. It is no secret that there is a large part of our population that has mental health issues. It's also no secret that our country and our health system could do a much better job addressing mental health issues than it does. However, the number of people with mental health issues who become violent is small, and the number who become murderers is smaller still. Your claim that a mental health issue caused the murder in this case is a disservice to all those who struggle with mental health issues every day. This isn't the first case I have presided over in which sanity or a mental condition of the defendant has been raised as a defense. I have had cases where the defendant's mental condition caused the defendant to act out in a certain fashion. But even in those cases, I have never seen conduct like this. I understand the claim of dissociative identity disorder. I have seen something resembling that, and I have seen defendants with schizophrenic disorders. I can understand those. What I have seen is that the mental condition causes the person to act a certain way, and when they realize what they did, they are astonished by what happened, or they have no memory of what happened. Your claim is that it was another personality that murdered Gannon, but there is no time during the minutes, hours, and days following the murder where Letecia came out and wondered, gee, why am I carrying a body around in my luggage? That just isn't credible. You knew what you were doing. You made a number of clear and conscious decisions to cover or disguise what you had done. Claiming a lack of motive is a common defense tactic, and it can be a sound strategy. The truth is, however, that it only takes a moment to make a bad decision that results in disastrous consequences. And oftentimes, we never know why a defendant chose a particular course of action. However, that does not mean that they did not intend to undertake a course of action. Sometimes, as in this case, the likely explanation is anger. An 11-year-old boy with burns who feels that he's not being taken care of. An 11-year-old boy on the verge of being a teenager Those of us who have lived through people or kids with that were teenagers, we know how that is. It is not hard to imagine Gannon saying something, "You're not my mom. I want my mom. I want my dad." And that would be enough to make you really angry. But anger is not an excuse. A defendant is responsible for the choices they made and the actions they undertook, even though those choices arose out of or were motivated by anger. It's clear that you hated and were jealous of Landon Bullard. You saw yourself as a better mother than she was. It's clear from the evidence that you had some resentment from being left with Mr. Stauch's children. It's clear you had some resentment toward Mr. Stauch because he traveled as part of his job. Some of that manifested as early as Al's assignment in Alaska when you made allegations against the people in his unit. That caused Al to have to return from Alaska. And in one of the phone calls that were played for the jury, you talked about having to take care of his kids while he was away and what a good mother you were. It's clear you felt trapped. You wanted out. You were searching for a new job and a new location in Florida. Mr. Stauch had been gone on his new assignment for less than 2 days when the fire in the basement occurred. I can imagine that you saw your whole future consisting of taking care of Mr. Stauch's children while he was off doing his thing, and that's not the future that you wanted. I can imagine Gannon at some point after he sustained his burns telling you wanted his real mom and how that comment would have made you angry. You took your frustration and anger for the marriage, the child care, the absence of Al, and even living in Colorado. You took all of that out on Gannon. The evidence suggests you first stabbed Gannon repeatedly, 18 times. Based on the number of defensive wounds, he was clearly conscious for some of that. He was certainly gravely wounded. And chillingly, it would also explain how you were able to mimic the sound of Gannon breathing in one of your sessions with Dr. Lewis. Those were probably close to his last breaths. He was dying but not dead. The evidence could also lead one to conclude that he either fell or rolled off the bed where you shot him in the head and then beat him with the butt of a gun or a baseball bat. That would explain the blood found at different levels on the walls in Gannon's bedroom.
All right, so we do have to take a break, but the judge going through his interpretation of the evidence in this case, saying clearly, even though the defense claimed that there wasn't any motive, which is a common thing used by the defense, he sees clearly that maybe Gannon said, hey, I want my mom, you're not my mom. That caused anger, and you lashed out. So we'll have more of his sentencing on the other side of the break, right here on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, unpacking the bizarre allegations in the Doomsday cult mom murder trial. Cult-like religious beliefs surround Lori Vallow Daybell as she stands trial for the murders of her 2 children. You'll hear the latest audio from inside the courtroom as we bring in experts to break it all down. Plus, live updates from Boise, Idaho on the most compelling moments from today's testimony.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan, tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.